So tell us a little bit about what you do.
About what I do? Well, I'm a landscape architect, my main training, but I'm also dabbling, I guess probably beyond dabbling, but working in the realm of landscape urbanism, which is this kind of new, somewhat theoretical approach to urban design, landscape architecture, overlapping ecosystems, that type of thing. So that's kind of my primary gig.
Cool. What are some of your favorite projects that you've worked on?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's a tough one. I would have to say a couple of parks that I designed in Denver. Those are really fun to do. They were small neighborhood parks, less than half an acre, but they had a high level of detail. But we were able to do them in a way that had a high design quality, yet they weren't really expensive. We made them work with the whole situation.
Cool.
One was what we called a reading garden, which was a small pocket park that it was more of a passive park than an active park, where people could actually go to talk, to read, of course, that was one of the ideas. And so the theme behind it had a lot of text and quotes and passages, and it was also a community-based park. So the community was raising funds for it. So we created this little amphitheater in the shape of an ellipse with the words garden that were like 18 inches tall. They were like 3 feet high that came up out of the ground. And there were these abstracted leaves that were shade structures, and they had the word reading in the top carved out. So the sun would actually cast a shadow down on the ground, so it would say reading and then garden. And around the edges of this, we created a series of these granite bookends that would have the donors' names on them, similar to the bricks they do in different projects for donors. But this had these granite pieces, so they could buy that, and so it became this whole idea of it looked like a big bookshelf.
It sounds amazing.
It was a lot of fun, yeah.
Very cool. So let me ask you, why did you choose to relocate to Phoenix?
Complex, actually. The company I was working for in Denver, which I had been with for 10 or 12 years, something like that, they were advancing me to the principal level, and in doing so, they require everybody has a master's degree. So I applied and got into Harvard, so I went to graduate school, and I was finishing up there. Partners from the company came, and then they kind of re-recruited me to come to Phoenix. I was assuming I was going back to Denver, but they said, well, we've got some opening in Phoenix, we need new leadership. And so I said, well, I'll check it out. So I got on a plane, came down here, and started looking around, and immediately I was struck, and I said, this seems like an interesting place. So that's how I wound up here. But the thing that really drew me here was the design opportunity. Things that were happening in Denver were good design, solid design, things like that, but they weren't really pushing the envelope with creativity. Where when I came down here, immediately I could see that there were opportunities to do those type of things. And then of course, being a principal down here without having anybody overseeing me in the office, as far as my designs, gave me even that further level of creativity.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about the Funk Lab.
A Funk Lab. It's our studio for my company, Edge Industries. But rather than just putting it in a typical kind of box and saying, okay, this is an office and here's what we do and all the rules, we kind of broke that apart. We just blew it up and said, look, what if we have opportunities to have other things occur in this space? For instance, having art openings and different lecture series and artists and kind of get the whole creative type intertwined into the space. It would be a much more fun, creative type of thing. So rather than just putting our Edge Industries logo on the front door and saying this is it, we said, well, let's call it something else. Let's call it what it really wants to be. And the idea of the Funk Lab kind of denotes this idea that it's not the standard corporate stuff, but we are a laboratory where we're thinking and creating, and we're trying to encourage those kind of happenings.
Cool. So why did you choose to locate the Funk Lab on Grand Avenue?
For several years, coming down to Grand Avenue, such a great location. I've always liked the kind of artist funkiness of the place and the different things that I'd seen down here. And totally by accident, I noticed this building was for sale. And my neighbor was my real estate agent, so I talked to him and we were able to track down who was selling it, and we got a chance to look at it. And I thought, this is exactly what I'm looking for, to create a studio, but not just a studio, but like I said, something not along the corporate lines. If I really wanted that, I could go downtown or Tempe or an office complex. This was more about, I want to be able to pull out a grinder and a piece of metal or a welder or whatever and do things and kind of make mock-ups and fabrications and those type of things. And if we want to get noisy or whatever, a place where we can do that and not some sterile environment that, you know, people have to talk at a certain level and so forth. It was more about making sure that this thing was wide open and just let people be creative.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Tell me a little bit about DIRT.
DIRT, that's our acronym for Drainage, Utilities, Recreation, and Transportation. The idea is it comes out of landscape urbanism in an overlapping structure of program. So if you think of the normal streetscape, it's segmented, divided, and so forth, and the way it works, it's a very kind of neat package of, okay, the drainage happens here, and the people walk over here, and the parking happens here, and the driving happens here. Well, we were looking at ways of creating something for the desert environment that responds to the urban heat island effect, but also looks at how can you have something that, when it's not a street, for instance, can it be something else? Can a parking lot not have to be a parking lot? When a parking lot during a festival, it's a festival ground. And how do these different things overlap and become multiple, multiple programs? So that's really what it's about, is how to take these, and those are kind of four of the main issues. The drainage, obviously, here in Phoenix, we get these huge monsoons, we get the deluge of water. So how do we take that, put that, because that's gotta be part of the system, with the idea of having utilities, which is another part that you've got to deal with, but also having this idea where people can play, and the idea of transportation, whether it's bikes, cars, segways, those kind of things, but overlap the system so they all can be in one place.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, last question. What are 3 things that you think Phoenix should do to radically change its future for the better?
Wow, that's a good one. 3 things. Well, I would say 1, I think it's the management of its urban systems. I was just having a conversation with somebody saying, I'm not sure why there aren't better standards for at least like requiring things like bicycle racks and how those things actually function to make Phoenix and promote biking, for instance, in Phoenix. That every place you go, you don't have to worry about where can I park my bike. That's one of the problems right now. So I would say there's this idea about how to manage systems, and not just bicycles, but can they look outside the box for things like parking? So rather than saying, we have a standard and this is parking's gonna be like this, but the flexibility of saying, we don't need all the parking, what we need are more transportation systems, which can allow people the opportunity to come into the city, move around the city, and not have to park their car. So that, again, that kind of overlapping of systems, if you will. I think one of the things comes just from a marketing standpoint of what Phoenix is. We've had such a political shitstorm lately that just gives Phoenix and Arizona this kind of a bad taste in some people's mouth. People that don't know what it's like to be here, they have this prejudice about, they're this and this and this, and who wants to go there? It's terrible. So I think it really needs a kind of PR assessment. Something's got to happen from the promotional side, because I think we've got great leadership now in the city. That's very exciting, and I think there are a lot of people wanting to do a lot of great things, but that doesn't show up in the headlines of the national papers. It's we've got to have these guns in schools kind of things that show up in the paper, and it makes us all look like we're some kind of radicals or something. So I think, a lot of those kind of things need to be clarified. I think the third thing would probably be the way the city is organized. I think it's starting to happen. To be a true city, I think you've got to have a certain density at the core that allow a lot of people to use transportation systems other than the automobile. Phoenix has been such an auto-centric city for so long that it's really difficult to come here, move here, and not have to own an automobile. So I think in the core area, and I think we're starting to see that happen, but as that starts to densify with 4 to 5 to 6, 7-story buildings, maybe some taller of residential mixed-use nature, those kind of things I think will make a great impact on the way that Phoenix can be set up. And the light rail is a big part of that, because now with the transit-oriented development that can happen at different nodes, that's going to strengthen the concept of living in an urban environment. Right now, Phoenix is kind of a downtown business district with all the bedroom communities. And I think pulling in more activity from people living in that environment on a 24/7 basis will improve the quality of life in downtown Phoenix.
Great.